Welcome back. Our next guest is a former monk on a mission to make ancient wisdom go viral. Now, with his videos topping more than 4 billion views, there's a good chance that you're already familiar with him. Here to share how we can train our minds for peace and prosperity is podcast host and author of Think Like a Monk, Jay Shetty.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm grateful to be here.
Let's start at the beginning because you were on a path, a life path, and then suddenly something happened that made you change course. So let's talk about how you went from being a business student in London to being a monk in India to being a former monk living in LA with over 35 million social media followers.
So I was born and raised in London and aspired to get a good degree, get a good job and settle down. And when I was 18, I met a monk for the first time. And what I saw in the monk was pure joy, happiness, peace, and the ability to serve the world. He was really involved in charity and philanthropic ventures. And that really inspired me at the age of 18. So when I graduated from university at around 21, going on 22, I decided to turn down my corporate job offers and live the life of a monk. And I lived in India and Europe and traveled across, learning, studying, sharing the wisdom, and also trying to have a positive impact in the world. So we'd wake up at 4 a.m., meditate for 4 to 8 hours a day, sleep on a thin mat on the floor. All our possessions were in a gym locker. And when I left that path, I really believed that what I'd found was so applicable to our modern, busy, hectic lives. And I thought, how amazing would it be if I could share this with the world? Now, I had no idea that people would respond in the incredible way they did. But around 4 years ago, I started creating these videos online to share these messages. Last year, I launched my podcast to help deepen those messages. And this year, my book. And I've been so deeply grateful for all the amazing support and really humbled by all the love.
Jay, you lived like a monk for 3 years. You studied, you fasted, you meditated. How is it possible for us to think like a monk without actually living like a monk?
There are mindsets and principles and practices and habits that each of us can employ in our daily lives. And I'll share some of my favorite ones. There were 4 key habits that made up our mornings as monks. And I truly believe that if we can just do 5 minutes of each a day in the morning, it will revolutionize how we feel. They are TIME: thankfulness, inspiration, meditation, and exercise. If we start our morning with those, we're already starting to think like a monk.
This pandemic, I think, has got people really re-examining their lives and their lives' purpose. That's certainly been on my mind. So how can we tap into our purpose when there is so much fear and uncertainty and, quite frankly, noise in the world? How can we really get into that deep inner voice?
It's really interesting that actually times of great change and times of trauma or pain are really powerful times to find our purpose because it shakes up our normality and it shakes up our certainty. So often these are the best times to discover our purpose because we start to ask questions like, what's my real priority? What am I really passionate about? And what pain is there in the world that I want to help serve or that really makes my heart hurt and I want to help ease in the world? Those are great starting points.
In your book, you highlight the importance of routines to bring intention to our days. But of course, during this pandemic, I feel like routines have sort of been thrown out of the window. So, how do you suggest we establish a healthy routine when our days feel so monotonous?
One of my favorite pieces of insights and wisdom that I learned living as a monk is that location has energy, meaning when we do something in a place every day, it becomes easier to do that activity, and that place now holds that energy. Now, the current challenge during lockdown has been we eat where we're meant to sleep, we sleep where we're meant to work, and we work where we're meant to eat. So we've mixed up a lot of the energies of our space. So what I would do is I'd start carving out, and even if it's a tiny apartment, start carving out corners or rooms or spaces where you do certain activities. It's really important to allow each space in your home to have a different energy. And you can do that by sound. You can play certain music in certain places. You can do that by scent, by having certain fragrances or essential oils or diffusers. And you can do that by sight, by having pieces of art or quotes or wisdom that inspires you. So start separating your spaces by giving them a unique sight, scent, and sound.
Many people's daily daily routines involve social media and interaction with social media. And you suggest, like many others have, that we need to start to audit the amount of time that we spend on social media. But you, like us, your job kind of depends on you interacting and people coming to watch your stuff and for things to go viral and so on. So how do you kind of balancing out those two pieces of information?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to be able to share this message through social media. Ultimately, I think it comes to people setting their own boundaries and their own limits. So I believe in your home, you should have no technology times and no technology zones. So these are spaces in your home where you don't use technology, and there are times in your home where you don't use technology. Now, that doesn't mean you never use technology, and it also means that you curate what's on your news feed. You're very selective about what you look at and what you watch and what you share. But it's really important to set these limits for all of us. And this is just a great habit technique where we know when, why, and for what reason we're on technology. I think what we want to get away from is the mindless scrolling and the meandering aimlessness of just being on our phones, as opposed to a very intentional view of I'm watching this because it makes me feel a certain way, or I'm learning from this channel, or I'm gaining something from this.
Social media, of course, can lead many people to a whole host of negative thoughts. You have a method for not just addressing them, but also actually replacing them. Please tell us what this looks like.
Absolutely. So there's this practice in the book, and it's these three words: spot, stop, swap. And if you're watching at home, you can repeat them after me: spot, stop, swap. The first thing we have to do is spot where these negative triggers come from. Do they arise when we're watching a particular show, or do they arise when we're on social media? Do they arise when we're around a certain group of people? We have to spot where these negative thoughts come from. The second thing we have to do is stop. We have to pause and ask ourselves, are these thoughts useful? Is there something I can learn from this thought? And finally, we have to swap it for another habit. So if you find that you always feel negative when you're watching a certain channel or following a certain account on social media, you may stop, reflect on it, and now you may swap that for listening to a podcast, or you may swap that for calling up a friend. So you're now replacing that habit with something that's actually effective and grounding.
So, Jay, I have a thing for pleasure and joy. I wrote a book about it. I have a website dedicated to it. But your book actually introduced me to a term that I hadn't heard before, which is mudita. And it's the principle of taking sympathetic or unselfish joy in the good fortune of others. That is something that we don't see enough of. What do you think is sometimes standing in the way of more people celebrating the successes of other people?
Yeah, absolutely. So mudita is a beautiful Sanskrit word, which, well explained, means just feeling the joy in others' success. And what blocks that is that we feel that there are a finite number of seats in the theater of happiness. So if you imagine that happiness was a theater and everyone could watch the show, because of the world and the way it's been built, we believe there are a finite number of seats. There are only 100 seats. And so we think if someone has seat number 99, then there's only one seat left. But the truth is, that's just not the case. There is no limit in the world on how many people can be joyful, thankful, happy, peaceful. There is no limit. But because of our world and how we've created limits and limitations, we all believe that if someone else is happy, then they may have taken our seat. And so therefore it leads to envy or jealousy. The way we give that up is by realizing that when we're joyful for other people's success, it actually helps us become a part of their success. And then it helps us understand how they reach there. And so we too can learn from that experience.
I'm curious to know what advice you might give to people who face those systemic barriers in society and feel like maybe there hasn't been space for them.
I think the first thing is that all of that it's very real. And so I don't think that that can be neglected or not really taken into account. And my advice would be that it's really important that those people who have more opportunity feel a sense of responsibility to support and stand up for those that may not have it. And for those that don't have it, I think the best advice that I can give is continue to discover your passions, continue to build your strengths, and continue to try and serve and impact the world, because that's a recipe for success for anyone and everyone. And that's the principle of dharma or purpose. And I really, truly believe that people who discover their dharma, discover their purpose, are able to have huge impacts on the world in ways that we never imagined. So I think it's a really exciting opportunity where people are going to make incredible change if they continue on, even in difficult times.
Jay, thank you so much for joining us. The book, Think Like a Monk, Train Your Mind for Peace and Prosperity Every Day, is available right now. We'll be right back.